And for more, we're bringing in retired Air Force Lieutenant General and NewsNation senior national security contributor Richard Newton. General Newton, always good to see you. Thanks for making the time tonight.
Good evening, Natasha. Always good to be with you.
There's a lot to talk about. Let's start with President Trump threatening to bomb Iran if they don't reach a deal with the U.S. over its nuclear program. What do you make of this threat from Trump?
I think the threat's real. I think when President Trump led the United States out of the Obama nuclear agreement with Iran back in 2015, 2016, President Trump led us out of that agreement. I thought that was a smart move, by the way, in 2018. Fast forward to 2025, Natasha, and Iran is closer, very much closer to actually building a nuclear weapon. We cannot tolerate that. Three challenges we have with Iran. First and foremost is their nuclear weapons development. They are much closer, as I mentioned, to a nuclear weapon. Secondly, is their ballistic missile capacity that can threaten not only nearby neighbors, but the rest of the Mideast. And third is their continued support to terrorist proxies. Israel's taken a dent into that significantly with Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. We're now attacking almost relentlessly the Houthis in Yemen. But that's the bottom line here. We cannot have Iran have a nuclear weapon that will be significant impact on U.S. national security, as well as threatening Israel, as well as certainly our friends and allies in the Mideast.
Play this out for us. What would a U.S. military strike on Iran mean for the Middle East?
Well, broadly speaking, first off, it would be a definite demonstration of the United States peace through strength. I believe it's only the United States that can really go in and destroy, Iran's nuclear weapons development capability. So it will show U.S. leadership. It will also not only be good news to the United States and Israel, but frankly to the rest of our allies and friends in the Mideast, the Arab nations who are partners, but also border along Iran. They don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon as well. So this could have a very broad impact in a very positive way if we took out their nuclear weapons capability, if we had to by force for the long term. But President Trump hasn't given up yet on trying negotiations. But Iran said that they're not going to negotiate directly with the United States. They'll do so indirectly. President Trump's not going to put up with that, nor would I advise him to do so.
Okay, let's move on. Trump also saying that, in his words, he's pissed off at Russian President Vladimir Putin. What impact does this have on negotiations, and how will Putin likely react to Trump's comments?
Well, so far, we've been trying to negotiate with Putin, and we've been lined up with President Zelensky in Ukraine to garner first a ceasefire and then to go into, long-term peaceful negotiations. But every time, just recently, President Trump, along with the support of President Zelensky in Ukraine, have tried to broker a ceasefire for just going after energy infrastructure on both the Ukrainian side as well as the Russian side. And Putin has not, he has not signed off on that or abided by that. Secondly, tried to go after, and we thought we secured a deal of a ceasefire in the Black Sea. Again, Putin has not abided by that, even though he preliminarily agreed to it. And so everything we've seen to date with regard to ceasefire negotiations, all Putin is trying to do, Natasha, is to garner concessions from the United States and also with Ukraine. His bottom line strategic objective remains topple the Zelensky government, Ukraine, and insert a Kremlin-like government in Kyiv. The United States is not going to allow for that. The rest of our allies in NATO and certainly in Europe, and certainly we're lined up with President Zelensky not wanting to do that. So lots to continue to unpack here, but it's a stall game. It's a stall campaign by Putin to get as much as he possibly can before he goes more offensive, I think, in the spring and summer offensive campaign in the ground, especially on that Donbass border in the eastern part of Ukraine.
Yeah, always appreciate the context you provide there. With the time we have, I want to talk about Greenland. VP Vance and his wife visiting Greenland this week to reiterate the Trump administration's desire to take over this territory. And now the president is saying he will not rule out military force to reach that goal. What would that do for international relations if the U.S. military takes an ally's territory?
Well, I really don't think that's in our playbook. We've had a long-standing agreement with Denmark, who oversees Greenland, since 1951, Natasha. We've had national security objectives in there for many decades. We have a very effective space radar tracking ground station there, but and also there are also some now in 2025. There are some strategic minerals that are of interest to the United States. I don't really believe that we would follow through with a military type of take operational control of Greenland, nor would I certainly advise the president to do that. But what I would do is make sure that the United States and the American people understand that Greenland is very much in our U.S. national security interest because of the airway, air lanes over Greenland that are protecting the United States, as well as now opening up sea lanes that both China and Russia are trying to get access to. I would remind our viewers also that Russia and China are modernizing their militaries. They're modernizing their capabilities to go beyond, in Russia's case, just Europe, or China's case, just in Asia Pacific, but more of a global nature. And I guarantee you, Russia and China have Greenland in their sights. And so this is where the United States, I believe the president's correct here in trying to make sure that there is not any Russia or China influence in Greenland, all the while we maintain our strategic objectives to keep those air lanes clear and those sea lanes clear for the protection of the United States.
Lieutenant General Richard Newton, always appreciate the analysis and the time. Thank you.
Good evening, Natasha.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.